Well, good Sabbath, everyone. Today is July 9th, 2022, and I want to welcome you all warmly to this study, this Bible study. And today, as indicated in the Teaching Hope Cafe, I'd like to begin a series on the Sabbath. And, like I said in the message, is getting back to basics. But yes and no, getting back to basics, yes and no, because by the basics, I don't mean just, a standard superficial study of the Sabbath where, we have a few comments about what the word work means and what, and just, what is work, what is not, and, what you can do, what you can't do. We'll touch upon some of that at some point, but that's not the heart of what I want to cover. What I want to cover is deeper than that. I want to give us the why of the Sabbath. I want to give us the connection of the Sabbath to many of the other things that we've been speaking about, particularly in the last couple of years with regard to new creation and humanity's future before Almighty Yahweh. And I think that if we understand those things better, I think we develop a better, bigger, deeper appreciation of the Sabbath, something which I believe can be missing from our understanding of the Sabbath, and therefore our observance of the Sabbath tends towards just the superficial, right? And people who are not familiar with keeping the Sabbath, they just kind of look at it as, well, this is just a period of time when we have to stop doing all the important things, right? We have to kind of set aside our work. We got to set aside school, and I can't do the kind of things that I would like to be doing on the Sabbath. And especially young people, they tend to have that sense of restrictions, and it's off base. It's off base, and the reason it's off base is because the meaning of the Sabbath is so much deeper, and it's so pervasive throughout the sacred scriptures from Genesis to Revelation, that it begs to be better understood and to be internalized in such a way that we see our deeper connection to Almighty Yahweh. It's the difference between, let's say, a child doing something because the parent just says, do this because this is what I tell you to do, and the child growing into adulthood and then doing those things because they truly appreciate the parent and what they stand for and wants to please them and now understands the reasons behind why the parent wanted them to do certain things and behave in certain ways. So I'm hoping that that's what the study will be. And I'm incredibly indebted to the folks over at the Bible Project. And as I said in the announcement, I'm going to literally use their notes to cover this, because quite frankly, they did such a thorough job as to leave you with scarcely anything to do. But of course, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take those notes and I'm going to go through them, and I'm going to explain things and facilitate a deeper understanding, as I hope to, on the Sabbath. It's 50 pages of notes. I'm not going to go through all 50 pages of notes. I'm just going to sit here and read the whole thing. You could do that on your own, and you can get that at any time. It's publicly available. But I do want to go through large swaths of the study and then just build upon that and give my own commentary and merge some things together, veer off a little bit on some tangents, and look at some other things that are related. And by doing that, I hope that we develop a really nice study on the Sabbath that we could turn to in the future, and you go to in the recordings, and that you can, if someone asks you questions about the Sabbath, you can direct them to that, and hopefully they can get a better sense of that. I also want to, at the same time, I don't want to make it so high level that it's just one big abstract study, right? Because that's not really the purpose of this. It's to get you to see the connections, but then to bring it down to earth, so to speak, so that you can have a better appreciation week by week as you keep the Sabbath. So with that in mind, let's turn to the study itself. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to share the notes. Just bear with me a minute as I pull those up. All right, so hopefully you can see those notes up there. And let's begin reading. So on page 1, introduction, on page 1 of the Bible, Yahweh orders a beautiful world out of chaotic darkness within a sequence of 6 days. And on the 7th day, Elohim rests. This introduces the major biblical theme of patterns of 7 that concludes with Yahweh and humans resting together as partners. And then this was done in connection with the video on the Sabbath. So that's what the reference is to the video. In this video, or in this study, we explore the theme of 7th day rest and the biblical concept of Sabbath. We also look at why Yahshua adopted this idea as a major part of his own mission to bring Yahweh's kingdom to earth. And by the way, this will we'll go to about 7 today, and then we'll just continue, and it'll probably go to 2 or 3 entries in the series. I don't know that I'm going to go too deeply into it because I like to move on to other things. You notice I've been doing more series lately because there's a lot of material I want to cover on certain topics. So I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to give enough to be able to really give you a good understanding of the Sabbath. So these notes explore this theme more thoroughly than a short video. The concept of Sabbath and 7th day rest is rich and complex, woven from start to finish throughout Scripture. And that's what I said before about it being like a thread throughout the Scriptures. Get ready for a lot of patterns of 7s. You'll quickly discover that the practice of the Sabbath is only one piece of the underlying message the authors are trying to communicate. So notice this index, and I'm just going to go over the topics here on the index. 30 centuries of Shabbat, Sabbath as the climax of creation, Genesis 2 to 3, and the failure to obtain Sabbath rest. And let's just jump around a bit. The 7th year of release for land and slaves, Sabbath and Jubilee in Leviticus 23 to 26, Yahshua, Sabbath and new creation in the promised land, David and Solomon, the Sabbath, Messiah and temple, Psalms, Sabbath as hope for cosmic rest, the Jubilee in Ezekiel, the Jubilee in Isaiah, the organization of John's gospel, Paul's thoughts on Shabbat, right? Sabbath controversy in Matthew 11 to 12. So you could see it's throughout the entire Scripture that the Sabbath is woven into these texts, and it all is significant because it ties in to the creation. And you've heard that I've been speaking over the last couple of years very heavily about what we have to look forward to, which is new creation, right? New creation as demonstrated first and foremost by resurrection for humanity, and then the rest of creation as described in places like Romans 8, where the entire earth is going to be filled with the presence, with the glory of Almighty Yahweh. And central to all of that is the Sabbath, because the Sabbath was central to the initial creation. So in the same way that the Sabbath was central to the initial creation, it's essential to new creation. It's at the heart of that as well. So let me just pause here for a second and just give you a few general thoughts about the Sabbath. So when we think about Sabbath, you know, what do you think of when we think about Sabbath? And this is just a question for you to ponder. What do you think about when you think about the Sabbath? Do you think about, you know, having to stop your regular work and your studies and having to kind of be restricted and, you know, and not able to eat certain things, or, well, not so much eat certain things, but not able to go to a restaurant and not be able to go to movies or whatever. And, you know, and this, that kind of restrictive sense, or do you think about it on a higher plane? I can tell you the way that we being individuals who have not been brought up in the Jewish faith, the way that we tend to view the Sabbath as compared to the way the Jewish people view the Sabbath is like night and day. No pun intended. It's like night and day. Okay. The way that the Jewish people observe the Sabbath is more along the lines of how the scriptures describe the Sabbath as a delight. Now, you know, human beings are human beings, right? So I don't want to present a romanticized, idealized picture of how even the Jewish people observe the Sabbath. I'm sure there are certain folks who also feel as we have about the restrictions and the pause in activity, etc. But as a whole, Judaism views the Sabbath much differently than we do. Now, of course, Judaism also adds a lot of things to the observance of the Sabbath because of traditions that have developed over literally hundreds of years. So some of those restrictions tend to be much stricter than we would recognize in our observance. But in the context of the people who are observing those things, they view those things as part of the charm of the Sabbath, if you will. So if you've seen the Sabbath observed in movies or in media, or if you've seen videos of actual Sabbath observances or little parts of Sabbath observances, either in the synagogue or in individual people's homes, then you've seen a very different atmosphere. Something that, quite frankly, I've tried to recreate in my own personal life and simply haven't been able to do it for a number of reasons. One of which is that for something like that to quote unquote work, everybody has to have the same attitude with that, in my opinion. Because if everyone doesn't have the same attitude, then you sort of feel out of place and it doesn't quite work in the way that you hope for it to. So what is it about the Sabbath that the Jewish people look at it in such a different way? Well, some of those things we're going to cover, I believe, in the course of this study. But regardless, what I like us to do, even if we can't recreate that familial atmosphere, even if we can't recreate that sense of wonder that the Jewish people have towards the Sabbath to that degree, I'd still like us to be able to have a better understanding of the Sabbath to the point where we're viewing it as something beneficial to our lives, and that we see it in the context of what the scriptures wants for us in terms of the beauty of the upcoming new creation. So when we think about the Sabbath and we think about what it means to rest, that has connotations that reverberate throughout the scriptures. And we're going to see that as we continue to go through this. So let's go back to the text and let's continue to read. 30 centuries of Shabbat. Think about that for a second. 30 centuries of Shabbat, 3,000 years. For some 3,000 years, 30 centuries, ancient Israelites and later Jews have observed the Sabbath day or Shabbat. What does observance of Shabbat look like? Friday afternoons are spent bustling and hurrying to make preparations before sunset. Last minute shopping, food prep, getting animals settled and children ready. At sunset, everyone gathers around the table to light candles and say a prayer. And again, that's one of the things that we don't necessarily do. It's a tradition as compared to a biblical commandment, but it's beautiful. It's nice traditions that have surrounded the Sabbath. It goes like this. You, by the way, undoubtedly, you've come up with your own traditions with your own family, I'm sure. Blessed are you, Elohim, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us with the commandment of lighting Shabbat candles. Well, there is no commandment to light Shabbat candles, right? So that's one of the innovations. And there's a whole thing around that I won't go into, right? Because my purpose with the study, by the way, is not to go into all the traditions that exist around the Sabbath. You can read about that on your own. But it's just to illustrate the way in which people view the Sabbath. The next 24 hours are spent eating, singing, praying. On Sabbath morning, you wake and go to synagogue to hear the Torah and prophets read aloud. You'll likely hear an exhortation on the scriptures to love Elohim and serve your neighbors. After that, you head home with family and neighboring friends. Come Sabbath evening, you share another celebratory meal, welcoming the eighth day. So you, in the same way that you welcome the Sabbath, you welcome the new week. So that ceremony, incidentally, that ritual is referred to as the Havdalah, which the word connotes making a separation between the Sabbath and the rest of the week. This eighth day is the first day of the new week, full of new tasks and opportunities. Why is the Sabbath observed so carefully and consistently by the Jews? The basic answer is simple. It was one of the 10 commandments Elohim gave to Moses for Israel to obey. This command is repeated 3 times in the Torah with some important differences and similarities. Are you guys seeing that pretty well? Yeah, okay. So here are three main texts on the Sabbath, right? And it's good for you to know and have these marked in your Bibles so that when people ask you about whether observance, the Sabbath commandment observance is mentioned, then you can go straight to those texts as witnesses of what it is that we believe. So Exodus 28 through 11 is a primary text, and then the companion passage is Deuteronomy 5, 12 to 15. And as you can see there are definite parallels and there are also definite differences, and we're going to take a look at that. And then Leviticus 23:3, and Leviticus 23, of course, is that primary chapter in the scriptures where all of the feasts are mentioned, all of the sacred seasons, maybe better put than feasts, are mentioned in one place. And that's where you're going to find the commandments of Passover and everything else, right? But the first one that you find there is the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is considered one of the seven, if you will, because it's unlike the other ones that occur one time a year. The Sabbath, of course, occurs once every week. And like the writers of the Bible Project notes indicated, the number 7 is rampant throughout Scripture. So if you consider we have the weekly seventh-day Sabbath, but then you also have the 7 sacred seasons, the way, and according to the way you count it in Leviticus, and then you have 7 every 7 years, which we all know as the sabbatical year, and it even has the term sabbatical within the term, right? It's the Hebrew is Shemitah, and then sometimes people will say Shemitah, but the Hebrew would be Shemitah, and then you have 7 weeks of sevens, right? Which is Pentecost. So it's 7 weeks, seven times 7, and then plus the 1 day is the 50th day, Pentecost, and then you have 7. The sabbatical is Shemitahs every 7 years, and then you have 7 sets of 7 years, or 7 times 7 year cycles, 7 times 7 sabbatical cycles, which is 49 years, and then the 50th, one more year, just like you have Pentecost that adds that 50th, that one. Not the 50th. Then you also have that in terms of years, and then you have what's known as the Yovel, or the Jubilee year. And there are things that unite all of those multiples of 7, and the kind of themes that run throughout all of those time periods have to do with things like liberty, have to do with things like rest, things like canceling debts. Right? So if you look at each one of those things, you have those types of themes woven in there: liberty, cancellation of debts, slaves that go free, etc. Right? It's very fascinating to think about. And it all goes back to the Sabbath, to the weekly Sabbath. It all goes back to creation, to the very beginning of creation, which is fascinating. So we're going to take a look at all of that. It is all interconnected. So let's take a look at these 3 passages and go a little deeper into them and just notice some of the differences. So if you look at Exodus 28-11, it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor. So immediately we're enjoined to remember the Sabbath, right? So some people say, well, remember, because in Egypt, because they were 400 plus years in slavery, they didn't keep the Sabbath during that time. So therefore they had to recall and remember the Sabbath. Well, there's some validity to that, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's more a commandment for perpetuity. Remember the Sabbath is, you need to make an effort to continually remember this day. You're going to always call upon this day. You're going to call upon the remembrance of the Sabbath, because you don't want to forget something that's so central to your faith. You don't want to forget something that's so central to your understanding and to your life. So you want to go out of your way to remember it and to observe it. And I'm sure that in Hebrew, there are other connotations as well and other nuances that I'm not going into at the moment. But remember the Sabbath day, and don't just remember it, but remember it to do something. Remember it for the purpose of keeping it holy. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In other words, there's action that's required of us with regard to the Sabbath. The first thing is that you gotta remember it, right? You can't let it just go out of your memory and just keep doing your thing over and over again every day, and just lose track of it altogether. And even more than that, the way that you remember it is by doing something, by taking action to do what? To keep it holy. And holiness, just to remind you, has to do with separating something for the service of Almighty Yahweh. It's a consecration, to keep it consecrated. Consecration is a big word, and it's a big religious sounding word. Holy is also, but it very simply means that you are designating that time as something special, as something unique. It's not like the rest of the days of the week. That's why when people, want to say that the Sabbath is no longer especially individuals who are not used who are not used to keeping the Sabbath, they'll say something like, "Well, every day is holy." I'm sure you've heard that before. Every day is holy. That is absolutely not true, right? I know the intent in saying that, because people want to say that Yahweh is holy, so therefore, because all of time and all of us belong to him, therefore we have to recognize that he owns it all. I have no problem with that. I know he owns it all. But according to the way the scriptures describes what that term holy means, it means something specific. It's what's called a term of art. It's not just any old word. The word holy means something very specific. And it means specifically something, whether it's space or time or an individual or a group, whatever that thing or those individuals or groups are, they're imbued with something special, with something unique. And what they are imbued with is with a deeper connection to Almighty Yahweh through consecration. So for someone, if anyone ever tells you every day is holy, tell them respectfully, I disagree. That's just not true. Yahweh has designated the Sabbath day as holy, and that's the only day he is designated as holy, and there are reasons for that. So as we'll get into. So 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day, and you might emphasize there, all your work. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, right? So there are two different connotations to that. One of them is that your work is you human beings, right? But human beings never lose sight of the fact that human beings, the work that we are doing is work, presumably work in partnership with Almighty Yahweh. So your work is really also, to a certain degree, his work, right? But in the context in which this is written here, you shall labor and do all your work, your specific type of work. And there are connotations of the word work, whether it's avodah or melacha, whatever the other work is. There are connotations that have to do with what pertains to you and what pertains to Yahweh. But the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. And it's interesting because when you look at the Hebrew, and let's do that for a minute here. I'm going to be going back and forth between the notes and these verses. So let me take you to Exodus 20, verse 8. And by the way, I'm going to take my time with this study. So whatever we get done, I have no predetermined notion of where we're going to end. Wherever we end, if we do 2 pages of this, we do 2 pages. That's just the way we're going to do it. So hopefully you can all see that. So 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. So it's interesting. 6 days you shall labor. And I don't want to go too deeply into word studies today, but the work, if you notice, bottom left, you see that? It says avad. Everybody see that? Right. So labor. I can't go down there, but yeah, avad. So if you look, you just got to look at the bottom left. You see the word avad. But that's the word that I've explained to you in the past that you will find as servant. Remember when I gave a very detailed explanation recently about slavery and how the biblical slavery is different than the slavery that we've experienced in our modern cultures? Well, the word avad is that word slave. It's the same word. You shall slave, you shall serve. Avad is the word from which we get the term Obadiah, right? The name Obadiah means a servant of Yahweh. Okay. So it's service. 6 days you shall service. And then there's another word, and do all your work. So that's this labor. This is a verb in this case, right? And then do all your work. So here's a noun. You shall do all your melacha. And if you look at the bottom left, melacha. So melacha is, I've explained in the past that when we're told to cease from our work on the seventh day, that work is work that typically pertains to your field, whatever your field is, whatever gets you what you want in this world, whatever your typical, the things that get you your possessions and the things that you own that pertain to you are encompassed in the term melacha. So people say, well, what work can we do and not do? Well, melacha, the general guideline is that work that is that you would do for your own aggrandizement, for your own field, for your own, the thing by which you earn your living, that kind of thing. Okay. As opposed to a word like whatever the noun version of labor is, which is tied to the word avad, which is essentially any kind of toil. And there's another word, by the way, that's similar to that, which is the word amal, which also means toil or labor or hard work. And there's much more that I could say about that, but I really don't, like I said, I don't want to concentrate on that. But one of the interesting things about this term melacha that I do want to mention is that if you look at Jewish commentators, including the one who did the book that I really love, Rabbi Berman, Joshua Berman, on the temple, he describes this very well. The term melacha, that is the work that that characterizes the work that was done in the temple. So when they made the furniture and they crafted all the elements of the tabernacle and ultimately of the temple, that was melacha. So it's interesting because you have this connotation of work that's done in that tabernacle or temple. And then I mentioned that we have a connection with Almighty Yahweh in doing his work on this earth because we are co-rulers with him. You understand that? He gave us, in Genesis 1, he gave us the charge to subdue the earth and to rule over creation. So when you look at the temple and its predecessor, the tabernacle, what you're seeing there is what? It is a model, never forget, a model of heaven and earth connected. It's the ideal, it's Eden described there. So the melacha, the work that is being done in the temple, is the work of Eden, is the work that you're doing together with Almighty Yahweh in the world. So I think that's interesting because whatever it is that Yahweh gave you to do, whether you're a doctor or a nurse or an administrator of some sort, or whatever it is that you are equipped to do, that is the work that you are doing in the world, co-working with Almighty Yahweh to contribute to mankind. So there's a connection there with melacha. So melacha is not talking about going out into your garden and doing a little bit, right? That's not the work we're talking about here. Or, if you're sweeping around the house a little bit, right? That's not, I don't think you should be doing that anyway, because there are other connotations to the Shabbat that have to do with stopping from labor and from actually physically resting. So I don't think you should be doing a whole move on the Sabbath because it goes against that principle of rest. And I'm going to talk about that. So melacha doesn't cover that, but the rest part does, lest we get cute about it, right? And so I say, well, that's not melacha. No, it's not melacha, but it's also not within the spirit of the resting in the nuah. When we go to Isaiah 58 and it says, don't do your own thing, right? And I'm paraphrasing, it says, don't do your own pleasure. It's talking about doing things that are related to this melacha. Okay, so, and as we go through the study, probably another day, we'll tackle that a little bit deeper. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. In it you shall not do any work. And there's that word melacha again. You or your son or your daughter, your male or your female servant or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you, the stranger that stays with you. So let me go back to, okay. So if you look over here, it says, V'yom hashvi'i, and day 7, right? It's the 7th day, Shabbat, a rest, La Yahweh Elohecha. La Yahweh Elohecha. So the typical translations say is a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim, and you can translate it that way. However, what it literally says, V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat, and the 7th day Shabbat, rest, La Yahweh Elohecha, to Yahweh your Elohim. It's not a Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. It's a Sabbath to Yahweh your Elohim. It's a Sabbath to Yahweh your Elohim. More on that as we read the notes here. So hold off on that discussion for just a minute. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your manservant or your maidservant or your cattle or your sojourner who stays with you. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens, the earth. So you're told what to do, but then you're also told why. Why do we do it? For in 6 days, Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested Shabbat on the seventh day. Therefore, right? Therefore, for this reason, Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So why do we do it? Because Yahweh made the earth, the heavens and the earth in 6 days, the sea and everything that's in them, and then he rested on the seventh day. So the implication is, because he did this and then he rested on the seventh day, so should we. More on that coming up. Then let's look at the companion passage, Deuteronomy 5, 12 to 15. So he says, keep the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So it's kind of a double thing here, keep, right? Keep the Sabbath day to keep it holy, or observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy, as Yahweh your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. And I'm quite sure that if you go there, it'll once again say, La Yahweh Elohecha, to Yahweh your Elohim. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son, your daughter, your male servant, or your female servant, or your ox. Now it even adds more, right? Or your ox, the other one stops with with your male and female servant, with your cattle. This one goes and it specifies your male servant, female servant, your ox, your donkey, all your animals, and any of your cattle, or your stranger or your sojourner who stays with you, so that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. So it's not just you, it's also anyone who's in your vicinity, in your associated field, right? So anyone or anything for which you are responsible will also be observing the Sabbath. And notice he puts in a different word here. So when you go to here and rested in Exodus, the Hebrew is Shabbat. That's the word for rest. The word is the same when you look at the word rest, Shabbat, and then you look at this other word in Deuteronomy, and it's a different word. So what it gives here, does it mean that we're not Shabbating here? No, we are Shabbating, but we're also nuaching, right? I'm just, and they just use that word. Well, what is nuach? A nuach has a different connotation than this rest here, and they're both important. So your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. And incidentally, this word nuach for rest here is the same word for which we get the name Noah. Okay, Noah, which is Noach. So it's just a slightly different lettering of vowel pointing of the word. So Noach is the same thing. So the name of Noah essentially means rest. It means that in the connotation of rest as in settling in. So let me just give you that, and we'll see it a little bit deeper later. So this rest here, this term Shabbat, is a term that essentially means you cease, you stop doing something, you complete something, you stop doing it, you're done, you recognize that you're finished. But then this word for rest is a bit of a different word. It means it's nuach, and it means that you are actually settling in and just enjoying the fruits of your labors. It's a word related to the word comfort. So you look at the word nuach, and then you think about the word for, and I want to take you to this here. So if you look at this word here, this is Genesis 6, verse 9. These are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. And if you look bottom left, you see the word is Noach. Noach. Number 5146 in the Hebrew lexicon, 5146. Just hold your place there. And then let's look at 14, Deuteronomy 5:14. So that your male servant and your female servant may rest as well as you. Bottom left, the word nuach. And let me see if I can search for this word here. So it's interesting that when I searched for the word, it didn't bring me to the Hebrew word. What it did do is bring me back to Genesis 5. Now he called 5:29. Now he called his name Noah, saying, "This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, arising from the ground, from which Yahweh has cursed." So it's interesting. This one will give us rest from our work and from the toil of our hands, arising from the ground which Yahweh has cursed. So even there's a connection to creation, right? So let me go now to Isaiah 40. Comfort, oh comfort my people, says your Elohim. So this word nachem, down at the bottom left there, 5162, that word nachem is related, is cognate with the word nuach as well. Let me see if I can search for it here. So the word is comfort. Anyway, I don't have time to go through every nuance, but if we go look up the word and start tracing it, we'd see the connection with the word noach, comfort, rest. It's all in the same associated field there. So there's something special that's happening here on the Sabbath with the Sabbath day itself. So 6 days shall you labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of Yahweh your Elohim. In it you shall not do any work, you or your son, daughter, male servant, female servant, ox, donkey, or any of your cattle, or your sojourner who stays with you, so that your male servant and your female servant may nuach as well as you. And it says, you shall remember. And then here's another thing that is incredibly important, which is not shown in the Exodus verse. You shall remember. So remember, we're looking for the why. And in this particular case, you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. And Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, right? So therefore. So whenever you see a therefore, it means there's something, it implies something before it. So because of this, Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So we're being told that Yahweh commanded that he blessed the Sabbath, he made it holy, and he commanded us to observe it. Why? Two major reasons. One of them is because in 6 days, Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them, and then rested on the seventh day. So one reason is directly tied to creation. And then the other reason goes a step further. It's still tied to creation, but you shall remember that you were slave in the land of Egypt, and Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. So now he connects it to something else. He connects it to the Exodus itself. He connects it to liberation. Remember I said that all these sevens are all tied into things like rest, liberty, freedom from debts. What are we all looking for? Are we not all looking for, at a very deep level, are we not all not looking for stability? Are we all not looking for rest? Are we all not looking, rest from our labors? Are we all not looking for comfort? Are we all not looking for, do we not value freedom or liberty as one of the highest values in our lives? All humanity does that, in any culture, in any ethnicity, because all of this is deeply embedded in the hearts of men and women worldwide, because we're all trying to find our way back to Eden, where we find that. That's where we had stability and comfort and freedom, in Eden, because that's where we found what was in Eden. Well, in Eden, there was order, right? In Eden was a place of order. It was a place of completion. We had everything we could ever possibly want as human beings. And from where did Eden follow? From the very beginning of Genesis, we start learning major lessons about our lives. And this seems like we're just talking about all these ancient abstract ideas. No, this is the reality of our existence as human beings, all the way to the present day. And the Sabbath is the connector to that. So if we go all the way back to creation, let's look at it. Let's go to Genesis 1. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. He created a temple. That's what the temple represents. The earth was formless and void. Okay? Weha'aretz tohu vavohu. Tohu vavohu. Formless, tohu, vavohu, and vohu, void, empty. So you have many different translations of this, right? The earth was formless and void. I like Tim Mackey, who is the head of the Bible Project. I like his translation, was wilderness and empty. That's exactly right. What is wilderness, by the way? Break down the word, right? Wilderness, yes? It's something that's wild. It's something that's untamed. It's something that's out of control, disorderly, disheveled. So the earth initially was disheveled. It was wild. It was without order. It was in chaos. And void. Void means empty. It means uninhabited. No residence. It's empty. So there's a state of chaos and there's a state of something being uninhabited. And it's uninhabited because it's not fit to live. Why don't we go right now to a place like the moon and colonize as it is right now? We can get to the moon. We've been there before many times. Why don't we stay there? Because it's still too disorganized. It's wilderness. It's tohu right now. But you know what? As creators, like Yahweh is a creator because we're made in his image, we've been little by little moving towards the condition of no more being tohu, right? One day, maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe in my children's lifetime or their children's, that tohu, that condition of tohu will be removed and it will be colonized. I have zero doubt that within the next several generations that the moon will be colonized. Zero doubt. The conditions are potentially there. You know, other places like Venus and Mars and stuff, I don't know, right? We're talking about some serious tohu there, right? Very poisonous. It's much more difficult to do. But the moon, relatively speaking, piece of cake. But that's what we're talking about. It's wilderness now. It's wild. It's untamed. So nobody can reside there. So it has to remain bohu, also uninhabited, because there's no order there. But as soon as Yahweh starts forming everything, he first takes care of the disorder. He first takes care of the chaos. And he makes it no longer tohu. And now when it's no longer tohu, now he takes care of the bohu part. And now he inhabits it and he brings stuff in to reside there. And he goes a step further. And then the pinnacle of his creation, which is us, he makes us to be the ones to continue the process of ensuring that tohu and vohu do not return. So he puts us there and he says, okay, this can't be wilderness and this can't be uninhabited. You take care of it. You multiply, you fill the earth, you subdue. Did he not say that? Does he not say subdue when he makes mankind? What does he tell them? Let me go down a little bit further. Elohim created man in his own image, verse 27. Verse 28, Elohim blessed them and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Fill the earth. Why? Because in order to reflect his presence, they have to fill the earth. Because they're his representatives in the earth to reflect his glory into the earth. And the praise of the earth comes back to him. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, kavash, subdue it. So if we go and look for that word kavash, it's interesting. Bring into bondage, dominate, right? Subdue it. Something that's wild needs to be dominated. Something that's wild needs to be subdued. Let me see the concordance, the Hebrew Strongs, which is what we often look at. Well, anyway, I don't have time to do the full study, but the bottom line is that kavash means that you have to dominate something, that you have to bring it into submission, that's what you do with chaos. You subdue chaos. And then on top of that, once you've subdued the chaos, then you bring life into it. So it's no longer empty and waste and void. Something that's empty and waste is something that just tends towards more chaos. If you have a blank lot that doesn't have any buildings in it or whatever, what will happen to that? It will just remain in chaos and get progressively worse unless you put a force upon it, unless you put a dominating force to keep it from deteriorating into further chaos. And this is what mankind was meant to do on the earth, to beautify the earth. You think about what happened with the land of Israel. Before the Jews came into the land in the modern century, the land of Israel was a wasteland. It was neglected. Go read about it. There were marshes, and there were you think about the Lord of the Rings and the marshlands and all that. That's what so much of it was like. It was in terrible condition, and the Jews came in there, and they made it a garden. because that's what man does. Mankind dominates and subdues the wild. And we do that because Yahweh himself did it, because we are like him. Let's go back. So creation, right? Creation starts out wild, tohu vavohu, and then Yahweh makes order out of it. And then because of sin, chaos is reintroduced. And mankind is pushed out of the Garden of Eden. Because you can't have people residing in the midst of chaos and disorder. So from a symbolic point of view, sin brings chaos. It restores you to a wilderness condition. And mankind was pushed out of there. They were exiled, in other words, from the land. They were exiled from the land because the land became full of confusion and chaos. So instead of mankind dominating the land and making it work for him, the land pushed him out. And this is the same pattern that you see throughout all of Israel's history. If you think about the entire story of humanity, Israel was enslaved by Egypt. What does that mean? It means that they were thrown into chaos. They were thrown back into the wilderness, into a wilderness condition. And then they were liberated by Yahweh, by the hand of Moses. So it was as if Yahweh was once again taking the action that you saw in the beginning of creation. He was now taking them and he was removing them from the chaos, and then he would restore them to a land that was orderly, that was not tohu. And you see that pattern throughout history. And all humanity ultimately sees that same expression through Yahshua the Messiah, who removes the sin of the world. Remember, I explained that at the cross, Yahshua took it's like he drew to himself all the effects of the evil of the world and the poison and everything else. It's like he drew it to himself so that it would be removed from us. What did he do? He took chaos upon himself so that we could be liberated from that, so that we could be freed from that, a new exodus, you see. And all throughout all those things, whether we're talking about the original creation, or we're talking about the exodus from Egypt, or we're talking about the exodus from this world of sin through Yahshua the Messiah, it's all the same motif, the same thread going through the scriptures from the very beginning. And it's going to lead ultimately to the new creation. And the thing that ties in every single one of those situations is the Sabbath. So they come out of Egypt, and Yahweh gives them the Sabbath and reminds them and says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, because it's the connection. It's the connection to creation. It's the connection that says for 6 days, chaos was being removed. And on the seventh day, it was completed. So the Exodus, he removes them from Egypt, and then he says, keep the Sabbath day. Chaos has been removed. And then you get to Yahshua, and what does Yahshua say? He says, he basically says, I'm the Sabbath, right? You go to Mark 2, down to verse 23, and they meet the Pharisees. The disciples are picking grain. Why are they doing what's not lawful on the Sabbath? And he said to them, have you never read what David did, right? And his companions got hungry, etc. And then he says, verse 27, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is sovereign even of the Sabbath, because he's the one who created it. The Sabbath was made for man. The Sabbath was made as the crowning victory for mankind. Man wasn't made for the Sabbath. It's not, the Sabbath was not something that was done to be kept as a burdensome type of thing. It was meant to be the crowning achievement of Yahweh's creation, where he himself stepped back and said, it's done, it's completed. And mankind would benefit from that, because he would have the Sabbath from that point forward, from creation forward. He would have the Sabbath as a perpetual sign to remind him of that creation. So if you look at Exodus 31, verse 12, it says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, but as for you, Moses, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, you shall surely observe my Sabbaths, For this is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh who sanctifies you. I'm Yahweh who makes you holy. Therefore, you are to observe the Sabbath, for it is holy to you. And everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work in it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there is a Sabbath of complete rest, holy to Yahweh. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be surely put to death. And that work is the word melacha. So the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. That means forever. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever, olam. That means time out of mind. For in 6 days, Yahweh, notice how he ties it to creation. For in 6 days, Yahweh made heaven and earth, but on the seventh day, he ceased from labor, Shabbat, and was refreshed, nafash, which, by the way, ties to the word for soul, right? Life. In other words, he's on the seventh day, he stopped and saw what was completed and was refreshed. He was renewed, his life. In other words, it's a symbolic thing of renewal of life. I was reminded of the nefesh, of the life, the same breath that I gave you, the same breath of life that gave you, that made you a nefesh, that made you a living, breathing soul. Okay? So it's tied to creation. And because it brings life, this is something that's going to be a perpetual reminder to you. And so I'm just kind of giving you a very quickie like overview, and we're going to be examining all the details. So let's go back to our notes here. And then there's one other passage, the one in Leviticus 23:3. For 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day there's a Sabbath of complete rest, a holy convocation. You shall not do any work. It is a Sabbath to Yahweh, a Sabbath to Yahweh in all your dwellings. Okay. So let's read. All three commands have a similar line. It is a Sabbath of Yahweh. Literally, and by the way, it says there, Shabbat la Yahweh, to Yahweh. So if you ever seen, and I forget exactly where it is in the Torah, but it says Kodesh la Yahweh. When it's talking about there's the construction of the various elements of the tabernacle and of the priesthood. So this is probably in Exodus 28. It describes the little gold band that was on the mitre of the priest, of the bonnet of the priest, and the mitre was in gold, and inscribed in there was the expression "holy to Yahweh," right? And what it says is Kodesh la Yahweh, same construction, Kodesh la Yahweh, holy to Yahweh. So here Shabbat la Yahweh, a Sabbath or a rest to Yahweh, a Sabbath that belongs to Yahweh. However, and the reason I'm emphasizing that is going to become evident as we read here. However, notice the difference in reasoning between Exodus and Deuteronomy. In Exodus, the author hyperlinks to Genesis 1:2. He connects it to the creation. In this context, Sabbath represents participation in Yahweh's presence and rule over creation. When the command gets repeated in Deuteronomy, the author connects it to the Exodus event, the liberation from slavery. Here, Sabbath is a way, this is Deuteronomy. Here, in Deuteronomy, Sabbath is a way of implementing Yahweh's presence and rule by liberation from slavery. Sabbath was central to creation. Therefore, it will be a crucial aspect of our redemption and journey toward new creation. Jewish scholar Matityahu Savat also reflects on the importance of Sabbath. This phrase, and this is what Matityahu Savat also, what he said. He's a Jewish scholar. He said this in his book, The Basic Meaning of the Biblical Sabbath. He said, the phrase is so important, it's easy to miss its centrality. Just as in the 7th year of release, the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, man desists from utilizing the land for his own business and benefit. So on the Sabbath day, he desists from using that day for his own affairs. Again, shades of Isaiah 58. And just as the intervals in regard to the release year and the Jubilee years are determined by the number 7, so too is the number 7 determinative for that recurring day when man refrains from his own pursuits and sets it aside for Yahweh. In regular succession, he breaks the natural flow of time, proclaiming, and that the break is made for the sake of Yahweh. This meaning, which we have ascertained from the law, finds support in Isaiah 58. There it is. If you restrain, if you withhold your foot on the Sabbath so as not to pursue your own affairs on my holy day. And this one explains it even better, this paragraph. Man, and here, listen carefully. Man normally is master of his time. He is free to dispose of it as he sees fit or as necessity bids him. The Israelite is duty bound, however, once every 7 days to assert by word and deed that Yahweh is the master of time. 1 day out of 7, the Israelite is to renounce dominion over his own time and recognize Yahweh's dominion over it. Every 7th day, the Israelite renounces his autonomy, which is what the world is constantly doing differently, right? The world always wants to constantly assert its autonomy, even from Elohim. That's what Psalm 2 is all about. We're not going to do what you're going to do. We're going to cast off the chains, is what Psalm 2 says. We're not listening to Elohim. This is what's behind, the Enlightenment, right? Oh, we're rational beings. We reason things out. We don't need that old religion. We're autonomous beings, evolved from higher primates, and we don't have anything above us. Well, sorry, but you do. 1 day out of 7, the Israelite is to renounce dominion over his own time and recognize Yahweh's dominion over it. Every 7th day, the Israelite renounces his autonomy and affirms Yahweh's dominion over him. Yes, that's it right there. In the conclusion that every 7th day, the Israelite is to renounce dominion over time, thereby renounce autonomy, and recognize Yahweh's dominion over time, and thus over himself, Keeping the Sabbath is acceptance of the kingdom and sovereignty of Yahweh. So if you really want to reason, right, we get questions all the time, we meaning, ministers or people, anyone who keeps the Sabbath. Some of you may have gotten these types of questions. You get questions over time, or really not so much even questions, they're accusations, right? In the way that people describe them, they're constantly putting down something like the Sabbath, either directly or through passive aggressive ways of expression, as this is a burden to people, and they're thinking about all the things that they have to stop, and no, we don't got to do any of that, right? I got to work and blah blah blah. And then people have the questions about, well, can I do this on the Sabbath? Can I do this on the Sabbath? Can I do this on the? Well, here's the direct answer, right? And I really do not mean this to be passive aggressive or whatever, but the real answer to that question is you can do whatever you want, right? You have dominion over your time. You can do that. You have free will. But just understand that if you're looking at what the scriptures say, on the 7th day, you need to think twice about how you use that time. Because I think we asked the wrong question, right? I think we asked the question, it's almost a loaded question. We asked the question with the presumption that there are things that we want to do, that the Sabbath is kind of crimping our style. But here's the deal. If we understood what it means to recognize Yahweh's sovereignty over our time on the Sabbath, 1 day out of 7, it's not by the way, like some people say, well, and they simplistically put it, and they'll say something like, well, we have 6 days and Yahweh has 1 day, right? He gets his day and we get our 6 days. And that's another attitude that some people think. No, it's not that, because Yahweh, in that people are right, that Yahweh owns all the days, right? That's what the Sabbath is actually reminding you of, the opposite, that Yahweh is the one, ultimately, it's not your time, right? You think you have dominion over time, but ultimately Yahweh has dominion over your time and over your life. The Sabbath is just the recognition, the formal recognition of that every week. So when we look at it from the point of view of recognizing Yahweh's sovereignty over our time, it's actually liberating, because it means that ultimately, no matter what's happening to us or for us, Yahweh is in control. He's in control of our time. He's in control of our space. And the Sabbath is a weekly reminder of that. So if we look at it from that perspective, it would be a comforting thought. There's that word comfort again, right? It would be a comforting thought, because we would be in his rest. What what keeps us from thinking that, and what keeps us thinking along the lines of, well, I got to be doing this and I got to be doing that, I got to be that. It's just human nature, right? And I think that we all have done that and do that from time to time. I don't think any of us, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, I don't think any of us really view the Sabbath from this perspective about Yahweh having dominion over us, because human nature drives us so much. But that's the challenge, right? The challenge is to stop thinking that way. The challenge is to learn to think, learn to clear our mind to think in a new way about the Sabbath, in a way that doesn't view it as an imposition. Maybe that's a better word. An imposition on our time. It's not an imposition on our time. It is a reminder that he is in control, and that the things that we're going through, we can release them to him. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not there in my thinking yet. I still worry a lot on the Sabbath. I would love to work on my mind and my thoughts, on my thinking, to get to a point where I can turn things over to him, because I think that if I could do that for the Sabbath day, I'll be able to do that for other things as well. It's an object lesson for us to learn how to turn ourselves over and our problems and challenges and everything else over to him. And I think that if we could really grasp that ideal on the Sabbath, which is what the Sabbath is made for us to be able to think about those things and ponder those things without all the trappings of work and school and bills and tax collectors and this collector and this legal problem and that other problem and this, relationship problem. It's a means to step away from those things temporarily, in recognition that Almighty Yahweh is in control of all that. Like they say in the notes, it's a representation of Yahweh's kingdom, where those things will not take sway over you. In Yahweh's kingdom, it's what it's described in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5-7, where everything is as it should be. And it's a recognition of Yahweh's sovereignty. What does it mean for Yahweh to be sovereign? For Yahweh to be sovereign means that his word is word. Yahweh's sovereignty means that he is in control of all things. And that's a concept that is easy for us to express, but it's not easy for us, I don't believe, to understand and to truly believe, right? So if we could learn to really understand that, not with the head, but with the heart. I think we understand that with the head, right? I don't have to explain that over and over again. I think the problem that we have is having that penetrate in the heart, because because of our human nature. So as we consider these things, I'd like us to start meditating on that and thinking more about how we can recognize that Yahweh is sovereign in our lives. And it starts with the Sabbath. Sabbath is the climax of creation. The creation account on page 1 of the Bible, right from the very beginning, acts as a primer. What is a primer? A primer is like an introductory book, or it's more than that. It's a primer is kind of like it's like the manual, right? To understand the importance of the number 7 and the concept of rest. Let's take a look. So here's the literary design of Genesis 1. So the first day begins with darkness. Genesis 1:2. And the eternal light, I'm not crazy about the word divine, the eternal light creates an end to the darkness, creating the first day. Genesis 1:5. And that's what it says. And it was evening and there was morning, first day. Here's an interesting lesson here too. Elohim contains the darkness within a cycle of light and dark. Notice that. Elohim contains the darkness within a cycle of light and dark, bringing to it the order of time. In other words, naming it day and night. This pattern of darkness to light explains the unique account of the day in Genesis 1, where it says there was evening and there was morning, the X day, the first day, etc. Because creation began with darkness followed by light, the counting scheme of days and time is the same. The next day begins at sundown and ends at the next sundown. So this is a question that we've asked ourselves before, and I believe that this is the answer. That right from the very beginning in Genesis 1, Yahweh explains, because people will say nowadays, right? You'll hear this all the time, a lot of times from, and it's a fair question, right? But you'll hear this from a lot of times from folks who want to disprove the Sabbath, or they want to do the Sabbath in a certain way differently than from sundown to sundown. And they'll say, well, the day begins in the daylight, right? It doesn't begin at night, in the middle of the night. That's not correct, right? And I believe that this is the reason why, because it's a lesson that's tied directly to creation. The day does in fact begin at darkness. Excuse me, the day in fact begins in darkness, because it emulates creation. Because when Yahweh went to create, what is the first thing that he did, right? He had to separate the light from the darkness. So if you go to Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth, etc. And then his spirit was moving, it was hovering over the surface of the waters, but this was in darkness. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. We told that in the second verse. Darkness is over the surface of the deep. Spirit of Elohim is moving. The implication is like the spirit is looking and deciding, what do we do here? And then verse 3, that Elohim said, let there be light, Yehi-or, and there was light. Elohim saw that the light was good, and Elohim separated the light from the darkness. Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and that was it. That was the first one. There was evening, and there was morning, one day. Not light and then darkness. It was darkness and then morning. So the pattern of time from that point forward, according to Yahweh's way of doing time, is light to darkness. That's the answer. And it's as simple as that. And we in our, because of our man-made conventions of time, we want to impose our thinking back to Yahweh, and we have to take our cues from the word, not the other way around, because Yahweh is sovereign. Did I say light to dark? Dark to light. Thank you. Yeah, dark to light. So we look and because of our conventions, we say, well, sun up, and then whatever amount of light there is, and then light. So why don't we do the day starting with the light hours, and then we go to no, because the way that Yahweh did it from the very beginning, it was darkness to light, and then back to darkness, and then the cycle continues over and over again. And that's why we do things from sundown to the next sundown, right? And it's directly tied to the Sabbath as well. So let's keep reading. Okay, so because creation began with darkness followed by light, the counting scheme of days and time is the same. The next day begins at sundown and ends at the next sundown. The 7 days are structurally designed to highlight many themes. Take a look at the literary unit design below. We'll unpack some of these themes in the following pages. So here's where we start getting to the interesting things about order and order out of chaos, and vohu, the emptiness, right? So let's look at this carefully. So you have this prologue in the beginning, and I know this seems confusing, but I'll break it down. In the beginning, Elohim created the skies and the land, right? And then there's an exposition of prologue in 3 lines. The land was wild and waste, tohu vavohu, and the darkness was over the face of the deep abyss, tehom, but the breath of Elohim was hovering over the face of the waters, hamayim. All right. Then starting with the next verses, we start talking about how the earth was. And I want, before we even go into that, I want to reiterate that scholars who study this first chapter of Genesis have identified, through parallels with other ancient Near Eastern literature, they've identified how this appears to be in the same pattern and structure as constructing a temple. Okay, so what's happening here is that you have a temple that's being constructed, and then by the very end, which is day 6, the last thing that you do when you construct the temple is you put an image in that temple. As we all know, Yahweh doesn't have an image in the temple in terms of a stone or some kind of metal or something, a bust of something, for example, or a depiction of an animal or whatever. But he does have one thing in there that is an image. And what is that? It's a human being, a man, because that man is his image. And the purpose of the image is to, when you put that image in the temple, the purpose of the image is to show everyone around you whose temple that is. It's to show everyone around you who is the one that is that for who is the person, or not the person, but the Elohim for which that temple was built, because that is the one. That image is the thing that reflects it. It's a connection between the people on the earth and the Elohim that it represents. So a human being, a man, is put in that temple on day 6, because that is the image that's going to reflect Yahweh's glory to the earth. It's like if you think of a curved mirror, there's a part of it that's reflecting Yahweh's glory to the earth, and then there's a part of it that's reflecting the praise from the earth back to Almighty Yahweh. And a man was the representative that was placed in that temple in order to do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we go and we take a representation of a man and put it in there. No, it's the man himself that's the representation. That is the image that's being described there. Because that image reflects Yahweh's glory to the earth and the praises back to Almighty Yahweh himself. And then, of course, you have all kinds of corruption of that plan in the nations, but that is the way that Yahweh designed it, and then it was corrupted. So let's take a look at what this looks like in terms of these aspects of creation. So at the left-hand side, you see, at the moment you see nothing, because okay, there we go. Let me get my little spotlight. So on the left-hand side, you see days 1 through 3, where he's dealing with tohu, wilderness, unorder, chaotic, right? So he's making order out of chaos. So on day 1, he separates the light from the darkness. He calls the light day, says, "Let there be light," and he divides between the darkness and between the darkness and the light, and he calls that good. So the first thing he does is he literally sheds light on the matter, right? He literally takes the darkness, says, "This is not good because it's dark and you can't see." So he creates light from the darkness, or rather he separates light from the darkness. Okay. That's the first order out of chaos. Then day 2, he separates the waters from the earth because they're mixed together. It's wilderness. So he puts a sky dome in the waters. That's the rakia. The dome he calls heavens, and he divides the waters, so the different waters. So he has the waters above and the waters below, because they're mixed together, and that's not good. So he divides them. He puts the clouds out there, and then he has the or not the clouds, not yet, but he has the rakia, and then he has the waters below, the seas, etc. And he separates those. Order out of chaos. Then day 3, he separates the water from the land, right? So if I said land before, I was mixed up. The second day was just the waters being separated from one another. And on day 3, now he separates the waters from the dry land. Land emerges from the waters. He calls it good. Then he does plants and fruit trees that emerge from the land. Again, these are things that were not present yet, and now they start to come to fruition. The land's bringing forth vegetation, and then Yahweh calls it good. So those first 3 days are exclusively about bringing order out of chaos. He's dealing with tohu, with the wilderness. Then beginning with day 4, we start transitioning to that concept of emptiness and no residents and the no inhabitants, the vohu part of it. So this they refer to as the habitation of the ordered. Okay, so day 4, you're talking about lights. Let there be lights, and this is the heavenly bodies that are going to be used now to tell time, right? So now he's starting to do habitation of the heavens with lights, because now the waters are separated. You have the rakia, you have the waters on the earth, and now you can do the heavenly bodies And now where there were no heavenly bodies, now there are heavenly bodies. And not only are there heavenly bodies, but they're so orderly. They're so orderly now. So order continues through this, right? The habitation of the ordered. They're so ordered that they become the means by which we tell time. So now he adds the element of time here. This is why you have to go by Yahweh's way of doing things, not by men. I don't care that man said at midnight the day starts in the modern age. Or I don't care that someone says, oh, when the sun comes up, that's when we start because that's when you can see. That's not how Yahweh's plan did it. He said it was the darkness first, and then I separated the light from the darkness, and that makes a day. And that's the cue that we have to get from that. So now he has the heavens that are out there, the heavenly bodies that now allow us the luxury of creating our own time schemes, right? When they weren't there before. And then day 5, sky and water creatures in the waters and in the dome and the rakia, the birds, right? The water swarmers below, the sea creatures, the sky flyers above, the birds of all sorts, blessing, fruitful, multiply, fill the land, residents, right? No more vohu. Day 6, land creatures. Now we have beasts emerge from the land. Let the land bring forth beasts. It was good. And then the pinnacle of his creation, man, the image placed in the temple. Creation of Adam to rule the land. Very good. And that's day 6. So tohu, and by the way, you notice that there's an A and an A prime for each of these because there are parallels. Remember, I was explaining that when we were talking about parallelism. And I think I showed you a clip from, you know what, I may have done that with somebody else. But when I was talking about the book of Revelation briefly, I think I mentioned to you the A and A prime, or certainly when we were talking about the book of Daniel, there's parallelism in Hebrew poetry where the A matches with the A prime, the B matches with the B prime. So if you look at A, the first verses here, they have to do with light and day, and then the A prime also has to do with light and day, but it has to do with the heavenly bodies. In other words, the order was created to separate light from darkness, and now the order goes a step forward, and the emptiness is dealt with the same lights. And then B, you have the rakia, the sky dome, and the waters above and the waters below, and then the B prime is the parallel, right? The sky and the water creatures. So you have the creatures up in the waters above, and you have the creatures down in the waters below. See the parallel there. And then you have the land parallel, right? So dry land emerges on day 3, and then on day 6, all the land creatures inhabit that land. There's incredible structure in the scriptures. Incredible. I mean, please understand that there's so much that we just gloss over when we read biblical verses. That book of Job that we went through in 3 days, we could probably take 3 years to go through that and go through every poem and every section of it, because it's just with the structure alone, the literary structure, there's so much going on in there because it's inspired from above, right? You would expect to see things like that because it's that kind of order and intricacies woven into it. And you look at something like this and your mind is blown. I know mine is. And then the summary epilogue, thus were finished the skies and the land and all their hosts. And then when you look at 2 to 3, what do you have? Elohim completed on the 7th day his work which he had done, and he rested, Shabbat, on the 7th day from all his work which he had done, which means that he stepped back. It's like he steps back and he looks at everything, because every day he's looking at everything and he's saying, it's good, it's good. Elohim saw that it was good, right? He did this rather, and it was good. He did this, it was good. And then he looks at the end of day 6 and it's done. And he says, it's all good. It's a matter of fact, he says what? He says it's very good, right? It's tov ma'od, very good. And he steps back. And then he rests. So there's a combination of the stoppage of the Shabbat and of the rest of the Nuach that's implied there. But what is it? Is it that Elohim needs physical rest? Of course not, right? We're told that in the scriptures itself that he doesn't need any rest. But we know that he's Elohim. He doesn't need rest like we need rest. So what's that all about? It's not rest in that sense. It's rest in the sense of settling in. That's what Noah was doing when he got out of the ark. He was settling into the land. He was settling into a new home. It's not, I'm so tired of having sat in this ark for all this time. It's not that. It's not that kind of rest. It's a rest of comfort. It's like if you've been on heightened alert and you're doing all kinds of things and all kinds of busy work, and all of a sudden you finally get a moment to sit down, and it's not the physical exertion, it's the mental, I'm good now. I'm stable now. I'm safe. So the term nuach and to a certain extent Shabbat, it implies that. It implies settling in. It implies being content. It implies being safe, stable, secure. I can rest securely. I can rest in peace and safety with my boundaries safe around me. I don't have to worry about the invaders and everything else. Those are the connotations that you're seeing here. And the connotation, and Yahweh giving example, the connotation for him is not, oh, I'm so tired having done all these things for 6 days, right? That's ridiculous. It's not that at all. It's the idea of he's looking at everything now and he says, it's good. It's like as he sits in his throne and now he's just looking, settled in. He's dwelling with men now in peace and safety and just contentment. And he's watching over all his creation and ruling over his creation. And he has man on the earth to help him rule. That's what it's being described. It's interesting because chapter 1 of Genesis, the way it's described with mankind, and then going on to chapter 2, it's a description of a priesthood that's being established in Eden, is what we're seeing. It's a priesthood. And that's a study for another day. And then they ruined that by trying to take more than was meant for them. But he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And Elohim blessed the seventh day and he sanctified it, because on it he rested from all his work which Elohim created to do. Do you notice the symmetry and repetition of sevens? Scholar Michael Morales reflects on the significance. Emphasis on the seventh day is accomplished on a variety of levels in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3. The literary structure that balances and matches two triads of days highlights the unique seventh day as climactic. So the two triads of days are what we saw, right? 3 and 3. And then you have the seventh day, which is unique. Also, and by the way, and I think he's going to say that here, but if not, we may see it soon. Think about it. Every day, it was evening, it was morning. First day. It was evening, it was morning. Second day. It was evening in the morning, third day, etc. What does he say on the seventh day? He said it was evening in the morning, the seventh day. What does he say? He says nothing. Because it doesn't apply to the seventh day. Why? Because it's not the conclusion of the seventh day, because the seventh day really has no end. It's into perpetuity. It's forever. That peace that we're supposed to get on the Sabbath and that we remember every week, that peace is supposed to last into perpetuity, forever. It's the day that has no end. It's like you think about, we start at the end of the seventh day, we start the eighth day, right? But what is the eighth day really? The eighth day really is not an eighth day. It's really the first day of the new cycle. It is the eighth day, but it's not really. It's really representative of a new cycle. That's why we refer to it as a new beginning. It's the eighth day. How could it be a beginning if it represents 8? No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. It's a new beginning. And this is what you look at when the last great day. The last great day is the day that lasts forever, right? That's the symbolic meaning behind it. If you think about the scheme of salvation, the 7 days, the seventh day is the millennial period, where there's a transition, 1,000-year transition, where all the creation is secure, is made secure and stable. And then the eighth day is the last great day, which represents eternity. It's all connected. It's all interconnected. And by the way, let me give you another one, which is kind of interesting. You think about Yahshua and his resurrection, right? Well, when you look at the account, he doesn't rise on Sunday morning, but he arises by the end of the Sabbath, right? But we could really do a toss-up on how we describe that. We could say that because we know that he's already risen. The angel says to Miriam, why are you looking for him there? He's not there. He's risen. So this idea of Sunday morning service on Easter is really wrong, because he didn't rise on Sunday morning. He was already risen. He was risen in darkness. But you can say he rose at the end of the Sabbath, on the Sabbath. I'm not so sure that that's correct, that that's technically correct. He rose at the beginning of the week, right? But he didn't rise on a Sunday morning. He would have arisen probably in that twilight period between the end of the seventh-day Sabbath and the new day of the first day of the week. Same connection. Same connection. Doesn't mean that we stop worshiping now because he, even if we go by the interpretation, that's just, I offer that as an alternative interpretation, because it could be that he rose right at the end of the Sabbath. But even if he rose on the first day of the week, he didn't rise in the sunlight. He rose in the darkness, in the dark part of the day, as the day is just beginning. He was already risen. So if you look at it from that perspective, he arose beginning a new day, beginning a new eternity, if you will. So, and every one of these things is connected to the Sabbath day. So let's keep reading here. So he says, while the first 6 days are mentioned once each, day 1, day 2, day 3, the seventh day is mentioned 3 times in 3 consecutive sentences in 2 to 3. The seventh day is the first object that is sanctified, set apart as sharing in Yahweh's holiness in the Hebrew Bible. It's interesting. By this consecration, Elohim creates the seventh day as a cathedral in time, which is what Abraham Heschel said, forming a temporal space, a physical space, and filling it with holiness. Wait a minute, did I say physical space? Temporal is not, it's more of a time space. And filling it with holiness, so that here, at the culmination of creation, forming and filling kiss each other. Further, the description of the seventh day in 2:1 forms an inclusio frame around all of Genesis 1. Inclusio is just like bookends. That's what it means. So the description of the seventh day in 2:1 forms an inclusio frame around all of Genesis 1 by matching Genesis 1:1-2. So Genesis 1:1-2 and 2:1 and everything in between, right? The seventh day is justly interpreted as the fulfillment, purpose, and end of the story in Genesis 1, the goal of the whole creative process. Okay, then he goes through all the things about the patterns of 7. So let's just read that. It's no accident that the Hebrew scriptures say Elohim created the world in 7 days. 7 was symbolic in ancient Near Eastern and Israelite culture and literature. It communicates a sense of fullness or completeness. It's a complete cycle. In fact, Shava, 7, is spelled with the same consonants as the word Shava or Shava, complete, full. What is the origin of this understanding? Scholars think the significance of 7 likely originates in the lunar calendar of moon cycles. It's interesting. The biblical Hebrew word for month is moon, and we know that, chadash, consisting of 29.5 days a month. So each month consists of 4 7.3-day cycles, making a complete cycle of time. However, the Sabbath cycle is independent of the moon cycle, and Sabbaths do not coincide with the new moon, which is correct. It is patterned after creation. This is where you have some groups that want to make a connection between the two, and you can't make a connection. It is patterned after creation and stands outside of any natural cycle of time. This makes sense of the pervasive appearance of patterns of 7 in the Bible. Okay, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time with that. The author of Genesis clearly had in mind the significance of 7 when constructing the creation account. Take a look at the various patterns of 7 found in the first few pages of the Bible and think about structure here. Consider structure here. The opening line of Genesis, and I didn't know any of this until I started reading this. The opening line of Genesis 1 has 7 words in Hebrew. And the central word, which is untranslated in English, is 2 Hebrew letters, the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So when I look at this stuff and I say, people who don't recognize the supernatural nature of the Bible, they're just really missing it. Bereshit, in the beginning, bara, he created Elohim. Et, that's what's known, that's what he's talking about, that middle word. That's what's known as the sign of the definite direct object. Then the skies, Hashemayim, Ve'et, and others, definite direct object, Haaretz, the land. So this is the one, that definite direct object is what I referred to you, that it's like, it emulates the connection between heaven and earth, because that's what's being connected here. Heaven and earth are being connected by means of this particle, et, which consists incidentally of Aleph and Tau, the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So in other words, from A to Z, everything's encompassed here. So this is the kind of stuff that blows your mind. There are 7 words in Genesis 1:1 and 14 words in Genesis 1:2, so a multiple. There are 7 paragraphs in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3. He's of course talking about the Hebrew, right? Each marked by evening and morning. The concluding 7th paragraph in Genesis 2:1 to 3 begins 3 lines which have 7 words each. It's mind-blowing, mind-blowing. And he goes into some more of this, and I don't need to go all to that. But look at all these multiples. Each key word in Genesis 1:1 is repeated by multiples of 7 in Genesis 1:2 to 2:3. And I'll just kind of let you take a look at that. Okay. And on it goes. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about time. We still have a few minutes. When we isolate the theme of time in Genesis 1, another design pattern, by the way, you're getting like the equivalent of a college level course here. Hopefully I'm not presenting it too confusing. When we isolate the theme of time in Genesis 1, another design pattern emerges that provides a foundation for all of Israel's rituals of sacred time. This design highlights the structural significance of eternally ordered time in Genesis 1. Elohim provides the essential order, day 1, and then delegates the maintenance of that order to others, day 4. This is mirrored by the sacred calendar of Israel, which all looks forward to and leads up to the Sabbath. And then he shows you a chart there, light and day, dark and night. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all this, but I just want to show you different structural elements here. Notice here you have, again, A, B, C, C prime, B prime. It's parallels, right? And if, you know, and I'll tell you where you can get this. Matter of fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this and pop it into the chat so that you can grab it. So if you're not able to recreate that, let me know, okay? But it's in the chat right now if you want to take it and pop it into your computer and save it, and then you can look through that more carefully later. But I want to go on and look at a couple of other things here. Rest. At the climax of the creation story, Elohim rests on the 7th day. What does this mean? There are 2 Hebrew words that can be translated for our English word rest. Understanding their function and definition gives us a more robust understanding of what rest really means. Let's take a look. So he gives you Genesis 1:2, where it says after he completed his work, he rested, Shabbat, on the 7th day from all the work which he had done. And then, like I showed you before, and rested, Hebrew nuach, on the 7th day. Therefore, Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day. Shabbat, the same word for the other rest. And that's Exodus 20, verse 11. So the Hebrew Shabbat means to cease from. So Elohim ceases from his work because it is finished. And by the way, it's interesting that although he doesn't use that word there, it's a different type of finish. But Yahshua says at the cross, right? What does he say when it's done? It's finished. By the way, when does Yahshua begin his ministry? Anyone remember? At the age of 30, yeah. But where do you? Yeah, I'm kind of asking the wrong question. Let me show you. Luke chapter 4. Where does he begin? When does he begin his public ministry? Is what I'm asking. Anybody? On Shabbat.
Yeah, when he opened up and read the scroll.
When he opened up and read the scroll, right? So he comes out of let me see if I can get this on screen. And this is Luke chapter 4. So he finishes his trial in the wilderness. And by the way, notice from where he's coming. I say notice from where he's coming. He's coming from the wilderness, right? Okay, so he's coming from Tohu. And then through the word of Yahweh, order is instituted, right? And he puts him in his place. He puts the adversary in his place. That's vanquishing of Tohu. And now he goes and he begins to reside among the people. Emmanuel, Elohim with us. Elohim residing with mankind. Elohim, mankind that had been abandoned and was feeling abandoned and feeling in a condition of chaos in the midst of a foreign power, just like they were in Egypt. And now they're about to experience a new exodus. 4:14, Yahshua returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through all the surrounding district. And he began teaching in their synagogues and was praised by all. He's residing among them. And he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, and as was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath and stood up to read. And by the way, what does he read? Reads about liberty, right? The Spirit of Yahweh is upon me because he anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives. What is that? That's sabbatical year. That's Jubilee, right? Recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, release from chaos and confusion and wilderness, to proclaim the favorable year of Yahweh. And he began to say to them, today the scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And then he begins to heal, right? He begins to relieve oppression and heal. The outward manifestations of one big Shabbat, right? He starts that on the Sabbath day. Okay, let's go back to the notes here. So the Hebrew Shabbat means to cease from. Elohim ceases from his work because it is finished. Genesis 2:1. Compare with Yahshua 5:12. The manna ceased. Believe it or not, it says Shabbat on that day. The Hebrew Nuach means to take up residence. In other words, to be safe and secure, right? Compared with Exodus 10:14, the locust came up over the land of Egypt and rested, Nuach, on all the land. Isn't that an interesting cross-reference? So the locusts go and they go across the land and they rest, right? They're comfortable. They're nice and right. They found the sweet spot, right? So nuaching means that you find the sweet spot. When Elohim or people nuach, it always involves settling into a place that is safe, secure, and stable, which is what we're all looking for. 2 Samuel 7:1. Now King David dwelt in his house, for Yahweh had provided rest from his enemies. Elohim's rest is about Yahweh's presence taking up its rest within a sacred space by filling it with his eternal presence. Creation is depicted as the cosmic temple filled with Yahweh's presence on the climactic Sabbath. And then I'll maybe just go just a little bit further here. Blessing occurs several times in the book of Genesis. In the first occurrence, Elohim blessed the creatures and the humans on days 5 and 6, which meant being fruitful and multiplying and filling the land. By analogy, the blessing on the Sabbath would also involve a kind of fruitfulness, multiplying, and filling that is appropriate to our period of time. The idea is that the Sabbath would become many as it's observed and experienced by others. And is what Matilda Fry said in the Sabbath in the Pentateuch. Set apart from all other days, the blessing of the seventh day establishes the seventh part of created time as a day when Yahweh grants his presence in the created world. It is then his presence that provides the blessing and the sanctification. What does Yahweh say he's going to do? Oh, maybe there's something similar in Isaiah, but it's Habakkuk 2:14. I'll just read it. I'm not going to turn to it for you. 2:14 says, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. The earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of Yahweh as the waters cover the sea. And then if you go to a place like Isaiah 2, now 2 verse 2, now it will come about that in the last days the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills. All the nations will stream to it, and many peoples will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways and that we may walk in his paths. That's not quite the one I'm looking for, but okay, I'll find it for the future. All right, but anyway, the point is that that the glory of Yahweh is going to fill the entire earth, and that's what all of this is pointing to. The seventh day is blessed and established as the part of time that assures fruitfulness, future orientation, continuity, and permanence for every aspect of life within the dimension of time. The seventh day is blessed by Elohim's presence for the sake of the created world, for all nature, and for all living beings. And these are all scholarly reflections on the culmination of time in Genesis 1. So Samuel Ballantine said, unlike the previous days, the seventh day is simply announced. There's no mention of evening or morning, right? There's no evening and morning, seventh day, not for this one. There's no mention of evening or morning, no mention of a beginning or ending. The suggestion is that the primordial seventh day exists in perpetuity, a sacred day that cannot be abrogated by the limitations common to the rest of the created order. That's beautifully put. Then Richard Lowry said, the seventh day account does not end with the expected formula. There was evening and morning that concluded days 1 through 6. Breaking the pattern in this way emphasizes the uniqueness of the seventh day and opens the door to an eschatological interpretation, in other words, of the end days. Literally, the the sun has not yet set on Elohim's Sabbath. I love that. I love that. Bernard Oak, the Sabbath is that point in time where Elohim and man meet. On the seventh day of creation, Elohim joined himself and his eternal presence to his temporal creation, to the world of man. On the Sabbath day, man not only recalls, but participates in an act of cosmic creation. He experiences the original structuring of time within the microcosm of his own life. The observance of the Sabbath links humanity to an eternally ordained future, as well as an eternally created past. Sabbath observance has cosmic implications, a foretaste of an eschatological future, a prefiguration of the final phase of the eternal human reconciliation. I like that. In pointing back to the beginning, the Sabbath also points to what is yet to be, to the final destiny to which all creation is moving. Okay. And on. I don't want to read all these to you, but we just have one more and I'll end there. With regard to the lack of the final formula, that was evening, that was morning, commentators have argued, excuse me, that the seventh day is not meant to be understood as a literal day. This argumentation then has led to an eschatological interpretation of the seventh day. However, as part of the first creation account, the seventh day is the last of the 7 sections, and a formula that was evening, that was morning in the account of the weekdays may be taken not only as a closing formula, but also as a literary feature to anticipate what comes next within the series of sections in the creation account, that is the next day of the creation week. Functioning as a transition from one day to another, the closing formula is a feature that moves the text forward throughout the 6 weekdays with the intention to arrive at the 7th day. Okay, I'm not quite sure I understand that, but there it is. Once it arrives at the last section, the text highlights the identification of the 7th day by stating it 3 times and then has no more need for the formula, because there is no 8th section following for an 8th day. Creation has come to an end, for the 7th day has arrived. And that's Matilda Fry again. Okay.